Happy Friday. This is the reading of The Island of the Blue Dolphins, chapters 22 through 25. It's on page 141 of my book. Not sure what page it is on yours, but turn to chapter 22. This is where we left off yesterday. I did not want to go in the cave, nor did I take the necklace from the rock. That night, I slept on the headland at the place where I left my baskets. At dawn, I went back to the ravine. There, I hid myself on a brushy ledge. It was near the spring, and from it I could see the mouth of the cave. The sun rose and shone through the ravine, and I could see the necklace lying on the rock. The stones looked blacker than they had in the darkness, and there were many of them. I wanted to go down to the cave and count them to see if they would make 2 loops around my neck, but I did not leave the ledge. I stayed there all morning. The sun was high when Rontu barked, and I heard steps below me. The girl came out of the brush singing. She walked to the cave, but when she saw the necklace lying on the rock, she grew quiet. She picked up the necklace and put it down again and peered into the mouth of the cave. 2 of my baskets were still there, and then she went and drank from the spring and started off through the brush. I jumped to my feet. Tutok, I cried, running down the ravine. Tutok. She came out of the brush so quickly that she must have been waiting nearby to see if I would return. I ran to the rock and put on the necklace and turned around for her to admire it. The beads had not made 2 loops, but 3. They were long and oval instead of round, which was a very hard shape to make. Sorry about that. I had a pop-up on my screen. Let's see. Which is a very hard shape to make and takes much skill. Winsha, she said. Winsha, I said after her, the word strange on my tongue. And then I said the word that meant pretty in our language. Wintai, she said, and laughed because this was strange to her. She touched the necklace, giving the word for it, and I gave mine. We pointed out other things, the spring, the cave, the gull flying, the sun and the sky. Ronchu asleep, trading the names for them and laughing because they were so different. We sat there on the rock until the sun was in the west and played this game. And then Tutok rose and made a gesture of farewell. Makne, she said, and waited to hear my name. Wanapale, I answered, which, as I have said, means the girl with the long black hair. I did not tell her my secret name. Makne, Wanapale, she said. Pase no, Tutok, I replied. I watched her go through the brush, and I stood for a long time listening for her footsteps until I could hear them no more. And then I went to the headland and brought the baskets back to the cave. Tutok came again the next day. We sat on the rock in the bright sun, trading words and laughing. The sun went fast in the sky, and the time soon came when she had to leave, but she returned on the day that followed. It was on this day, when she was leaving, that I told her my secret name. Karana, I said, pointing to myself. She repeated the word, but she did not understand what it meant. Wanapale, she said, frowning. I shook my head, pointing again to myself. I said, Karana. Her black eyes opened wide, and slowly she began to smile. Pase no, Karana, she said. That night, I began to make a gift for her in return for the necklace she had given me. At first, I thought I would give her a pair of my bone earrings, but remembering that her ears were not pierced and that I had a basket of abalone shells already flaked into thin discs, I set about making a circlet for her hair. I bored 2 holes in each of the discs using thorns and fine sand, and between them I put 10 alveola shells, which were no larger than the tip of my little finger, and threaded them all together with sinew. I worked 5 nights on the circlet, and on the 5th day when she came, I gave it to her, putting it around her head and tying it in the back. Winsha, she said, and hugged me. She was so pleased that I forgot how sore my fingers were from boring the holes in the hard shells. Many times she came to the cave, and then one morning she did not come. I waited for her all that day, and at dusk, as I left the cave, I went to the ledge where I could watch the ravine, fearing that the men had learned that I lived there and would find me. That night I slept on the ledge. The night was cold with the first wind of winter. Tutuk did not return the next day, and I remember that it was near the time when the Aleut hunters would leave. Perhaps they had already gone. That afternoon I went to the headland. I climbed the rock and crawled across it until I could look over the rim. My heart beat loud. The Aleut ship was still there, but men were working on the dock and canoes were going back and forth, and the wind blew hard and a few bales of otter skins lay on the shore, so probably the ship would leave at dawn. It was dark when I got back to the ravine. Since the wind was very cold and I was no longer afraid that the Aleuts would find me, I made a fire in the cave and cooked supper of shellfish and roots. I cooked enough for Rontu and me and for Tutok. I knew Tutok would not come, yet I put her food beside the fire and waited. Once Rontu barked and I thought I heard the sound of footsteps and went to the opening and listened. I waited a long while and did not eat. Clouds moved in from the north, covering the cold sky, and the wind blew louder and made wild noises in the ravine. At last I closed the mouth of the cave with stones. At dawn I went to the headland. The wind had died, and fog lay over the sea, washing against the island in gray waves. I waited a long time for a glimpse of Coral Cove, but finally the sun burned away the fog. A little harbor was deserted, and the Aleut ship with its red-beaked prow and red sails had gone. At first, knowing that I could now leave the cave and move back into my house on the headland, I was happy. But as I stood there on the high rock looking down at the deserted harbor and the empty sea, I began to think of Tutok. I thought of all the times we had sat in the sun together. I could hear her voice and see her black eyes squinting close when she laughed. Below me, Rontu was running along the cliff, barking at the screaming gulls. Pelicans were chattering as they fished the blue water, and far off I could hear the bellow of a sea elephant. But suddenly, as I thought of Tutok, the island seemed very quiet. This is chapter 23. The hunters left many wounded otter behind. Some floated in and died on the shore, and others I killed with my spear since they were suffering and could not live. But I found a young otter that was not badly hurt. It lay in a bed of bull kelp, and I would have paddled by if Rontu had not barked. A strand of kelp was wound around its body, and I thought it was sleeping, for often before they go to sleep, they anchor themselves in this way to keep from drifting off. And then I saw there was a deep gash across its back. The otter did not try to swim away as I drew near and reached over the side of the canoe. They have large eyes, especially they are young, but this one's were so large from fear and pain that I could see my reflection in them. I cut the kelp that held it and took it to a tide pool behind the reef, which was sheltered from the waves. The day was calm, and I caught 2 fish along the reef. I was careful to keep them alive because otter will not eat anything that is dead, and I left them in the pool. This was early in the morning. That afternoon, I went back to the pool and the fish had disappeared and the young otter was asleep, floating on its back. I did not try to treat its wound with herbs because salt water heals and the herbs would have washed off anyway. I brought 2 fish every day and left them in the pool. The otter would not eat while I was watching. Then I brought 4 fish, and these also disappeared, and finally 6, which seemed to be the right number. I brought them whether the day was calm or stormy. The otter grew and its wound began to heal, but still it stayed in the pool, and now when I came, it would be waiting for me and would take the fish from my hand. The pool was not big, as it could easily have gotten out and away to the sea, yet it stayed there and slept or waited for me to come with food. The young otter now was the length of my arm and very glossy. It had a long nose that came to a point and many whiskers on each side of its largest eyes I've ever seen. They would watch me all the time I was at the pool, following me whatever I did, and when I said something, they would move around in a very funny way. In a way, too, that made pain come to my throat because they were gay and sad also. For a long time, I called it Otter, as I had called Rontu Dog, and then I decided to give the otter a name. The name was Munani, which means little boy with large eyes. It was a hard task catching fish every day, especially if the wind was blowing and the waves were high. Once, when I could catch only 2 and drop them in the pool, Monani ate them quickly and waited for more. And when he found that was all I had, he swam around in circles, looking at me reproachfully. The waves were so high the next day that I could not fish on the reef even at low tide. And since I had nothing to give him, I did not go to the pool. It was 3 days before I could catch fish, and when I went there again, the pool was deserted. I knew that he would leave someday, but I felt bad that he had gone back to the sea and that I would never catch fish for him again. Nor would I know him if I saw him again in the kelp, for now that he had grown and his wounds had healed, he looked like all the others. Soon after the Aleuts had left, I moved back to the headland. Nothing had been harmed except the fence, which I mended, and in a few days the house was the same as before. The only thing that worried me was that all the abalones I had gathered in the summer were gone. I would need to live from day to day on what I could catch, trying to get enough in the days when I could fish to last through the times when I could not. Through Through the first part of the winter before Monani swam away, this was sometimes hard to do. Afterwards, it was not so hard, and Rontu and I always had enough to eat. While the Aleuts were on the island, I had no chance to catch little smelts and dry them, so the nights that the winter were dark, and I went to bed early and worked only during the day. But I still made another string for my fishing spear, many hooks of abalone shell, and last of all, earrings to match the necklace Tutok had given me. These took a long time, for I searched the beach many mornings when the tide was out before I found two pebbles the same color as the stones in the necklace and soft enough to cut. The holes in the earrings took even more time, for the stones were hard to hold. But when I was done, I had rubbed them bright in fine sand and water and fastened them with bone hooks to fit my ears, and they were very pretty. On sunny days, I would wear them with my cormorant dress and the necklace and walk along the cliff with Rontu. I often thought of Tutok, but on these days especially, I would look off to the north and wish that she were here to see me. I could hear the talking in her strange language, and I would make up things to say to her and things for her to say to me. This is chapter 24. Spring again was a time of flowers, and water ran in the ravines and flowed down to the sea. Many birds came back to the islands. Trainer and Lurai built a nest in the trees where they were born. They built it of dry seaweed and leaves, and also with hairs of Rontu's back. And whenever he was in the yard while it was being made, they would swoop down if he were not looking and snatch a beakful of fur and fly away. This he did not like, and he finally hid from them until the nest was finished. I had been right in giving a girl's name to Lurai, for she laid speckled eggs, and with some help from her mate, hatched two ugly fledglings, which soon became beautiful. I made up names for them and clipped their wings, and before long they were as tame as their parents. I also found a young gull that had fallen from its nest to the beach below. Gulls make their nests high on the cliffs in hollow places on the rocks. These places are usually small, and often I had watched a young one teetering on the edge of the nest and wondered why it did not fall. They seldom did. This one, which was white with a yellow beak, was not badly hurt, but he had a broken leg. I took him back to the house and bound the bones together with two small sticks and sinew. For a while he did not try to walk, and then, because he was not old enough to fly, he began to hobble around the yard. With the young birds and the old ones and the white gull and Rontu, who was always trotting at my heels, the yard seemed a happy place. If only I had not remembered Tutok. If only I had not wondered about my sister Eulape, where she was, and if the marks she had drawn upon her cheeks had proved magical. If they had, she was now married to Kimku, and was the mother of many children. She would have smiled to see all mine, which were so different from the ones I had always wished to have. Early that spring, I started to gather abalones, and I gathered many, taking them to the headland to dry. I wanted to have a good supply ready if the Aleuts came again. One day when I was on the reef filling my canoe, I saw a herd of otter in the kelp nearby. They were chasing each other, putting their heads through the kelp and then going under and coming up again in a different place. It was like a game we used to play in the brush when there were children on the island. I looked for Monani, but each of them was like the other. I filled my canoe with abalones and paddled toward the shore, one of the otter following me. As I stopped, he dived and came up in front of me, and he was far away, yet even then I knew who it was. I never thought that I would be able to tell him from the others, but I was so sure it was Monani that I held up one of the fish I had caught. Otters swim very fast, and before I could take a breath, he had snatched it from my hand. For 2 moons I did not see him, and then one morning while I was fishing, he came suddenly out of the kelp. Behind him were 2 baby otter. They were about the size of puppies, and they moved along so slowly that from time to time Monani had to urge them on. Sea otter cannot swim when they are first born. They have to hold on to their mother. And little by little, she teaches her babies by brushing them away with her flippers and then swimming around them in circles until they learn to follow. Monani came close to the reef, and I threw a fish into the water. He did not snatch it as he usually did, but waited to see what the young otter would do. And when they seemed more interested in me than in the food, and the fish started to swim away, he seized it with his sharp teeth and tossed it in front of them. I threw another fish into the water for Monani, but he did the same thing as before. Still, the babies would not take the food, and at last, tired of playing with it, swam over and began to nuzzle him. Only then did I know that Monani was their mother. Otter mate for life, and if the mother dies, the father will often raise the babies as best he can. And this is what I thought happened to Monani. I looked down at the little family swimming beside the reef. Monani, I said, I'm going to give you a new name. It is Wanani, which fits you because it means girl with the large eyes. The young otter grew fast and soon were taking fish from my hand, but Wanani liked abalones better. She would let the abalone I tossed to her sink to the bottom and then dive and come up holding it against her body with a rock held in her mouth. And then she would float on her back and put the abalone on her breast and strike it again and again with the rock until the shell was broken. She taught her young to do this, and sometimes I sat on the reef all of the morning and watched the 3 of them pounding the hard shells against their breasts. If all otters did not eat abalones this way, I would have thought it was a game played by Wanani just to please me. But they all did, and I always wondered about it, and I wonder to this time. After that summer, after being friends with Wanani and her young, I never killed another otter. I had an otter cape for my shoulders, which I used until it wore out, but never again did I make a new one. Nor did I ever kill another cormorant for its beautiful feathers, though they have long, thin necks and make ugly sounds when they talk to each other. Nor did I kill seals for their sinews, using instead kelp to bind things that needed it. Nor did I kill another wild dog. Nor did I try to spear another sea elephant. Ulape would have laughed at me, and others would have laughed too, my father most of all. Yet in this way, I felt about the animals who had become my friends and those who were not, but in time could be. If Ulape and my father had come back and laughed, and all the others had come back and laughed, still I would have felt the same way. For animals and birds are like people too, though they do not talk the same or do the same things. Without them, the earth would be an unhappy place. And that's the end of chapter 24. On Monday, we'll pick up with chapter 25. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and know that you're being prayed for.